Near Future E3 by Jennie Moench. Warrior Publications Incorporated. Copyright 2023 by Jennie Moench. All rights reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part in any form. Transporter Episode 3. Era was distraught, as was everyone around him, at his cousin's funeral. She was so young, only 3 years older than he was. The two were close online, even though they hadn't seen one another in person recently. It was Janet's father who pushed the button that ignited the fire on the cremation chamber. Janet's mother, grandmother, and aunt all let out wails as the fire instantly ignited. Tears streamed down everyone's faces. It was a very sad occasion. Afterward, the small crowd of mourners gathered at Pia and John's home. Era felt sad for the older couple when he realized that they were now childless. They lived in a neat, one-story house that was now much too spacious for the couple. There was a whole wing of the structure that was empty. He hated the sad look in his Aunt Pia's eyes whenever they met. She seemed to be especially kind to him. He wondered if it was because of her loss that she now looked a bit envious at him. Like she wanted to keep him, in place of her perished daughter. You know, Era, Janet had the very latest technology and equipment. If you ever want to come by and use it, you are more than welcome. He nodded shyly at his aunt. But he could tell that there was something else that she wanted to ask him, and it was later, as he was about to leave with his parents, that she was able to corner him alone. I think she was murdered, Pia stated very bluntly. And I think the details are recorded in her computer system. I think if someone, who was good with technology, were to sort through her equipment, they might be able to find out who it was. She said this looking very earnestly at the nearly graduated computer science major. Era didn't know what to say. Pia drew nearer the young man. You could stay here for your last year. You could have Janet's room. The desperate mother implored. You could use her transporter. It's all new, and now it's paid for. She wailed, then began sobbing anew. Era felt very awkward. He didn't know how to comfort someone, but he tried. Hugging his aunt, and then patting her back as he began to cry himself. He promised to consider his Aunt Pia's proposition, but at that time, he just wanted to get out of that house. Away from the death, away from the reality that he would never see his cousin again, and away from his realization that death was real, even for someone as young as himself. The ride home was quiet. Era didn't mention his aunt's proposal, but after he helped Daddy into her favorite chair, it became the topic of conversation. His Aunt Pia had already discussed the possibility of him living with her for his last year of college. I think it would be good for my sister to have someone to care for, Alicia stated once everyone was seated in their living room. She was looking at her son with sad eyes. I don't want to see you go, but maybe it would be good for you. I know Pia would take good care of you. She looked away into a distant nothing as she continued. I don't understand how Janet fell from a cliff, but however it happened, maybe you could help. She finished quietly in the direction of her only child. As soon as he was able to escape to his room, he noticed a tear run down his cheek. He turned his body as he sat on the edge of his bed, so that he could lay on his stomach and rub the tears off onto his pillow. Era had always been a quiet boy in person. He had inherited well-balanced features from his Tamil mother and European father. His skin was a healthy tan color. His eyes were large and brown with a ring of gold in the centers. On bright days they shone like the sun. He was almost an inch over 6 feet tall, slim-built with long legs. But his shoulders were broad, and with a little bit of a regular workout, his chest and arm muscles became well developed. He was a handsome man, although he himself had no idea. He still only thought of himself as that smart Indian kid from high school. But online, while his cousin's avatar had taken on the appearance of Kali the Hindu goddess, he was the Prince of Hind. The prince was always dressed in royal colors with gold trim. He even had his own show where he interviewed people. His guests were fellow gamers. They would meet with him at his virtual set, and the conversations would be about new and popular games. This was when his shyness disappeared. In fact, he had virtual girlfriends, many were fans. His dream was to have enough followers that he could attract more sponsors. But, as far as his family was concerned, this whole online thing was a distraction from his studies. And, to be fair, it was, Error admitted. Janet was the only one who understood what he was trying to do, and that there was a possible future in it, and now she was gone.
Next Level with the Prince of Hind is an alive interview with that aggravating avatar that beats you in your favorite game, every Thursday at 6 o'clock.
This week's interview will be with Sheba the Destroyer. Tune in if you want to discuss how she kicked your butt in Fairyland. Boomed the voice of the prince over a picture of an animated version of him giving his famous, twinkling eye wink into the camera. The animation faded into a long view of him sitting on a gold and red velvet throne in his royal palace. It sat on an oriental carpet with a smaller, yet very ornate, guest throne beside his. They appeared in his courtyard of palm trees and colorful orchids. A light breeze kept the beautiful foliage astir, while behind and between the two thrones was a new addition to the set. It was a large statue of the multi-armed goddess Kali, but wearing a red sari, black armor, and the face of his cousin. Sitting on the smaller throne was his guest, Sheba the Destroyer. She was dressed as a fairy with a green tunic, pointed ears, and a set of transparent, but iridescent wings, that fluttered as she waited patiently for the prince to begin his interview. Sheba! So nice to have the opportunity to talk with you. Thanks for being a guest. The prince leaned into her with a raised eyebrow and formed an enchanting smile with his thick, well-shaped lips. Sheba wondered if he looked anything at all like his avatar. Thank you for asking me, she responded. This is an amazing set. She looked at the camera. I don't know if the audience can see this, but there is a bluff in front of us that faces the west, and to what appears to be the making of a beautiful sunset. Every night. You should come here more often, the prince responded in a low voice. His avatar raised an eyebrow again and caused that eye to twinkle. Sheba smiled, and the prince heard a faint giggle. There was a small hesitation before she spoke. I also love the new statue. Is that a Hindu goddess? The prince was glad that she noticed it, but didn't want to get emotional over the details, so he nodded. Thank you for noticing. Yes, it is a new addition. But let's talk about you. You have the high score in Fairyland right now. Isn't that right? He bent his elbow on the arm of his throne and curled a finger under his chin, gazing at Sheba intently. The real live Sheba was contemplating the amorous avatar. She wondered if it was his husky whisper of a voice that made him so alluring. Ah, yeah, I'm now 3,200 points higher than my closest competitor, she explained. The prince could tell by her halting voice that he was having an effect on her. He raised his perfectly formed black eyebrows, then pursed his large sensual lips for a second before asking his next question. I heard a rumor that part of your success has to do with an unconventional way you use bobo berries. Is that true? He asked. Well, yeah. I throw them with one hand while using a sharpened thorn in the other. I made the thorn spear myself. It's a great way to defend yourself if someone sneaks up close to you. But if you smash someone in the face with a berry in close contact, it blinds them for a few seconds. The prince looked pensive. Is that something you discovered while playing? Or is it somewhere in the documentation? Sheba was beginning to feel more comfortable. No, it's not documented, and I probably shouldn't be giving out my secrets like this. Her avatar was smiling broadly. But if you wait until the last minute, then smash the berry square in their face, it stuns them for just enough time to run them through with a spear. The prince sat up. Oh, so it takes some real expertise. He nodded at her with adoring eyes. This flustered her for a moment. Yeah? It's definitely something you need to practice. Well, then I challenge you, the prince announced with a flourish. Then you can practice on me. I would give a life in Fairyland just to experience one of your famous bogo berry executions. Sheba laughed. Okay, I'll make you a thorn spear. The prince moved to the edge of his seat. Would you really? He asked excitedly. I'd let you take my life twice for it, he offered, then looked at her expectantly for an answer. Sure. She shrugged, then wondered if they had just made a date. The prince smiled, then sat back in his throne. So, how long have you been playing Fairyland? He asked as Era was secretly sending her a message. Meet me at the cyber cafe after the show. A few years. Sheba considered. I got a subscription for my birthday. I guess it's been 3 years now. Sheba could hear the faint alarm that someone had messaged her off camera. The prince could see her looking down at her left hand, making it obvious that she was reading his message. How long before you were playing at an expert level? He asked, redirecting her attention to the sparkle in his large dark eyes. She was feeling butterflies in her stomach. Well, at first I just hid from other players and explored the forest. The prince nodded again and made an agreeable sound. So you are the curious kind? Yes, she admitted, then noticed another message on her communicator. I know that I am curious about you. Sheba made an involuntary giggle. She hoped that the prince hadn't heard it, but when she looked back at his avatar, she could tell by his smile that he had. They continued talking for nearly an hour before the prince looked into the camera, raised his eyebrow, and made his eye twinkle for the last close-up shot that signaled the end of his show. Once the live stream was ended, the prince smiled at Sheba. We had a lot of viewers for that show. You were a hit. He smiled at her adoringly. So, do you have any time for me? He asked in his deep whisper of a voice. Sure. Well then, he began. Why don't you attach yourself to me, and I'll take you to this cyber bar that I like to go to. Sheba fought her nervous habit of giggling and complied. The next thing she knew, the two of them were in a large room with red walls and round black tables with chairs arranged around an empty stage. Avatars and bots of all types were speaking loudly to one another, walking all around them, and some were sitting at tables together. A bar at the back of the room had every stool filled with both cartoon and realistic-looking avatars, as well as a group of 3 beautiful and very vivacious blondes who noticed the prince when he appeared. Ah, the Tenoshi girls, he said to himself with a smile as he gave each of them a twinkle wink. He knew the girls well and couldn't help but be a bit flattered when he noticed them frown as Sheba stepped in behind him. He fired off a message to them that he was having a business meeting and hoped they'd be around later. Giggles. He really enjoyed the 3 and how they liked to do everything together. Unfortunately, Sheba noticed the exchange, but didn't say anything. He motioned to an empty table for them to sit, then took his golden seat as it was no longer a throne but had transformed into a common wooden chair. Era pulled the real live office chair on rollers up to the holographic table, close to Sheba. He pressed a button on his keyboard and the air was scented with sandalwood, so that he could imagine how her hair smelled, even though the scent was unknown to her. It was so cool being the prince, he said in his head, as he inhaled deeply. I never want to be anyone else. When he glanced back toward the bar, the girls were waving and throwing him kisses. He laughed and waved back. Sheba's avatar was without expression, sitting beside him and observing the action. Sorry, he apologized. They are fans of the show, he explained. It was obvious to Sheba that they were more than fans, but she tried to ignore them. I'm sure you have many fans. Your show is becoming very popular. Is it a lot of work? Do you have help? The prince sighed. Yes, it is taking more and more time. I am a one-man show, he admitted. I do the editing too. Wow. Even the little animations? He nodded. Yeah, but once I have the programming down, I just use inserts. Then, he looked at Sheba. So, what do you do when you aren't gaming? Sheba laughed. That's what my parents keep asking me. You too, the prince related. Yes. I keep taking classes, but I still don't have a major. Well, it sounds to me as though you are being given a choice. My parents have decided for me. Sheba stopped laughing. Really? The prince sighed again. Well, actually, I did choose, but it was so long ago. I am a different person now, but my parents are old-fashioned and think that I need to be in high-tech, like my cousin was. What about the show? What do they think of it? Not much. My cousin brought up an episode for them to watch, and she tried to explain to them about my viewers and how I have sponsors, but they think it's just, well, nothing, the prince said glumly, instantly regretting his mood-killing honesty. Sheba's avatar carefully placed her right hand over his and looked into his face. What a shame! I think any other parents would be thrilled at your creativity and talent. Era was touched. There was something about Sheba that made him want to kiss her. It was at this time, as the avatars were close, that they heard the giggling of the Tenoshi girls. When they looked up, the three were standing near their table, but the one in the center was wearing a long coat that she flung open to expose her curvy naked body, and as the couple's eyes took in the spectacle and moved down to the area where her legs came together, they noticed that there existed a small Prince of Hind logo. The prince burst out laughing as the girls scurried away, glancing at him over their shoulders, and running out the exit. Era was quickly typing out an appreciative message to them, promising to be available soon. Sheba was silently smiling, but the spell was broken, and this was disappointing to him, as he had been enjoying her company. I'm so sorry, he cooed. Listen, let's go back to my palace and I can show you the beach. It's beautiful at night. Sheba agreed, and the two were instantly transported to a beautiful, wild beach where the sky was so full of bright stars that they lit up the night and shimmered on the breaking water. Each wave thundered as it hit the sandy beach. Boulders lined the shore, and when she turned around, she could see that they were at the bottom of a tall cliff. Era pressed a button that blew a gentle breeze on the avatars. How romantic, she thought to herself, especially when she turned back around and noticed that the wind was buffeting his hair. A seagull cried. The prince drew closer. Sheba became a bit nervous. Are there ever any other avatars here? She asked. The prince shook his head. No, this is my kingdom. No one can come here without permission. For a sad moment he considered how this was now true, as his cousin had passed away. Then, he pushed the memory away and returned his gaze at Sheba. You know, Sheba, there was something that I wanted to do before we were distracted, he said in a whisper close to her avatar. Sheba looked up at him as he grew closer still. Era moved his invisible right hand to his mouth and began to sensually suck and kiss the base of his thumb, pretending it to be her lips. After several seconds, the prince pulled back while Sheba's lips were still pursed and her avatar eyes were close. He smiled and waited for her to open them, then bent closer to her face. So tell me, Sheba, he purred, is your avatar complete? Oh yeah, she answered softly. She allowed his avatar hands to gently guide her to the ground and under him. With her delicate wings wrapped under her head like a pillow, she writhed on her back as the water lapped over her, and she allowed him to undress her. His gloved hand skillfully untied the front of her fairy tunic and let loose the pink flesh of her bosom. Tiny sea foam bubbles lapped over them. The prince made a humming sound. Sheba! No, she moaned. Call me by my real name. Cynthia! The prince looked down on her to study her breasts. Syfy chai. He sang out softly, then looked her avatar in the eyes. You know, I think I like that even better than Sheba. It sounds so sexy. He finished by bringing his face close to hers and kissing her. Then, began kissing neck, and then chest, and then, he grabbed the front of her open tunic and ripped it off. He laughed and threw it out of the way. And there she lay beneath him naked. Era pushed a stack of books that he had on the floor with his feet to get them out of the way, then continued to move down the body of the avatar under his left arm, careful not to crush her and the illusion. He held his right hand in his mouth, making a soft sucking sound that was barely audible to Sheba. She let out a little scream when he made it to her most private area. The prince became excited as well. Cynthia, 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 ouch! He hissed, then giggled as he had accidentally bit himself. What? Sheba asked, puzzled. Nothing, my dear, he laughed, raising up so that he could see her face. It's just that you are so beautiful that you made me hurt myself. He started to return to his previous position when Sheba stopped him. Wait, what is your real name? She asked. The prince looked taken aback. Why, I am the Prince of Hind. He made a sweeping motion with his arm. And everything that you see around you is my kingdom. Sheba laughed. You know what I mean, your birth name. Who are you? He paused a moment. This was a question he usually refused to answer, but as he looked down on the beautiful fairy, he felt the need to comply. Error. She repeated the name. Yes, but it's a secret. Don't tell anyone. Is it Indian? Yes. Do you really look like your avatar? The prince sighed. He already wished that he hadn't told her his name. This conversation was a distraction. Basically, you see, I'm an Indian guy. But I have to admit, in real life my eyes don't really twinkle. I guess they are just the average amount of shiny. How about you? Well, my skin is less green and I don't really have wings, but other than that. Her voice trailed off as she unbuttoned the prince's silk shirt. She opened the shirt and looked at his tight chest. Does your chest really look like this? The prince laughed. Well, it did. I have to admit that I haven't been working out as often as I was when I photographed myself for this avatar. Are you fat? No, if anything, my problem is the reverse of that. I have a very active metabolism, so I stay pretty thin. How about you? Sheba was still examining the ripples of his taut torso. I'm not fat, not thin. I look just about the way you see me. The prince nodded, but didn't know what he would do with this information. What difference did it make? Yet, for some reason, he didn't want to lie to her. So, she was drawing information from him that he normally didn't divulge. They continued with their love-making, pleasuring themselves while captivated by the other.